Welcome to the Rime Buddhist Center's Dharma Talk podcast, Achieving Peace Through Compassion. This podcast is a recording of the Dharma Talks given during our Sunday service. This talk was given by Lama Matthew Palden Gocha.
Today, my Dharma talk is From Cushion to Commute, Bringing Buddhist Practice into Daily Life. We've been doing our Basics of Buddhism class for, 10 weeks now, and we're now talking about putting Buddhist practice into daily life. And when many people think of putting Buddhist practice or integrating Buddhist practice, they think, or maybe they imagine monks in meditation halls chanting sutras, sitting in silence on a cushion. And while these are powerful supports, the essence of the Dharma is not limited to formal practice. The Buddhist teachings is meant to infuse every moment of our lives, our work, relationships, even the mundane routines of daily life. The true challenge and also the true liberation comes from applying the Dharma off the cushion in the very midst of ordinary life. I don't want to read the rest of this. I want to share my own experience of putting the Dharma into everyday life. You see me up here on this pedestal Lama mat, but I wasn't always Lama mat. Many of you who've been here at the Rime Center for very long remember ordinary mat. And when I look in the mirror, I see ordinary mat. And I want to share my experience of putting the Dharma into practice, because a lot of times we think of like the Nike slogan, just do it, just sit on the cushion, just change your ethics and your behavior. But anybody who's ever tried to break a habit, whether it's smoking or addiction, or you just don't want to pick your nose anymore, understand it's very difficult to break that habit, to change who we are. So to sit there and say, just do it, can be a little contrite. It can be a little disingenuous, I think, for people who are trying to do it. I'm curious, how many people have been practicing Buddhism for 5 years? Raise your hand. How many people have been practicing for 10 years? 15 years, 20 years. So you'll notice that as we keep going, the hands are starting to drop. As you saw those hands go up, for those of you who haven't been practicing that long, these are folks that you can rely on as well. These are people who've been on the path and have been trying to integrate the Dharma into their everyday life. So my experience is just one of a multitude. And we're all different. We all come from different backgrounds. We all have different challenges in our life. So when I talk about my own experience, I can only talk about it from my personal space. I can't expect you to relate to that and say, oh, wow, geez, if Lama Matt could do it, it must be that easy, because it isn't. One of the first things I learned was about how to have a relationship with a teacher. And in those teachings, they talked about, for many times, people will think, oh, to support a teacher, I'll support them through their efforts, like running tech and helping out around the shrine room. And while that's excellent, that's not necessarily the best way to support a teacher. Other people think, well, if I want to support a teacher, I will provide financial donations for their projects and other things like that. And while that's excellent, it's still not the best way to support a teacher. What do you all think is the best way to support a teacher, to follow a teacher? What's that? Practice the Dharma. The teacher, that's what they're trying to do. If they are teaching you, if they are, like when Lama Gersum Rinpoche came last weekend, he gave us teachings. If you saw Lama Gersum Rinpoche as your teacher after that weekend, the best thing to do is to put what he said into practice, to take those instructions and to really practice them. Because the teacher, while they're appreciative of their students' financial contributions and their time and talent, if you really want to make the teacher happy inside, if you can show or demonstrate through your practice that you're taking what they're teaching you and actually putting it in practice, that really, there's something about that makes a teacher pause and say, oh, this is my student. Many times I've seen people who say, oh, so-and-so is my teacher, but then they don't put anything that they say into practice. And then I think, well, maybe you don't want to do that particular practice, and that's okay. But at the same time, it's like, if they're your teacher, they're mentoring you. I think sometimes we put teachers on these like huge pedestals, and I always like to think of the teacher as a mentor, right? The people that had their hands up, that have been practicing 10, 15, 20 years, they've been on the path and can also mentor. You can sit there and say, Tasha, I'm really struggling with this, and Tasha can share her own experience, and it may relate to you, and it may help you overcome an obstacle that you're experiencing right now. The other thing I think about as far as Buddhism and putting it into practice, I like to think of it as an experiment, especially with behavior changes, because we are, through habits over our lifetime, countless lifetimes, according to Buddhism, we act a certain way and we respond a certain way. When somebody says something kind to you, you think about it and you go, oh gosh, yeah, they're a really nice person and make me feel good. But if their words are harsh or critical, your mind changes. And so then you naturally respond out of habit a certain way, whether you have kind of self-destructive thoughts, or you have, you respond with criticism or negative thoughts. We just, it's a habit, right? It's just in-tuned. So when we practice mindfulness and can start to see those triggers and start to see how our reactions are, we have a moment, we have a pause where we can now choose a different path. In Buddhist teachings, they always give us that alternate path, and multiple alternate paths sometimes. So that way we can pause and we can say, okay, the teachings say to do it this way. Maybe I should try that and see what happens. So I'm going to share a life story. I'm going to tell you all about how I met my daughter. So my daughter is 32 as of this date. I think so. I don't know. She's old. And you all are probably thinking, wow, Lama Matt, I took the goatee off so I look a little more boyish. But I started very young. I was still in high school when my daughter was born, but I didn't know about her. I didn't know about her until she was about 10 or 11 years old. Now, for the time, I was working security. So I was at a warehouse, just working security. And I worked with a lot of guys. And I remember seeing them going through divorces or going through situations where they had parental custody, where they'd have to go to the courts, and they would always fight it. They would always put a lot of energy into whatever they wanted their outcome to be. And I remember that caused them a lot of suffering. Usually it was anger, usually it was fear, but for me, it was a lot of having to listen to them talk negatively about the situation, whether it's the person, the kids, the courts, whatever their situation, they would talk just awful about it. And so one day my HR person came up and said, hey, Matt, you have the courts looking at you for child support. Now, I've been extremely faithful to my wife, and we've been married for gobs and gobs of years. We got married in 99, so that tells you how many gobs of years it was. And this was after I had been married, and I was shocked. I was like, what are you talking about, right? I was really concerned. And so one of my Sangha members here at the Rime Center had been a school counselor and had mentioned and so I was talking to him about this, kind of trying to process it. And they said that sometimes when people go through the court systems to get support services, the state will go after custody, right? It's just I can understand that. The state doesn't want to put money out there if they don't have to, if there's another parent that could support. But the person said, well, it could be a situation that somebody needed to claim a father and they just pointed at a yearbook and said you, right? So I was like, oh, okay, well, sure, whatever. Doesn't sound right, but okay. Needless to say, I found out who the mother was, and we had a relationship in high school. And But they couldn't really tell me much more than that. And I remember really being conflicted about this. And then it dawned on me, this is an excellent opportunity to practice the Dharma and use this as an experiment. This was the watershed moment of me understanding that the Dharma can work, because I thought, I've been told by all these teachers, by Lama Chuck and all these visiting teachers, about how we can put the Dharma into practice and find peace and happiness. So I remember, or I recall, seeing all my coworkers and others that going through this process, just how awful they felt and how awful they were, how ugly they had become in this process. And so I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to do the opposite of that. I'm going to do what the Buddha had talked about. And so what does the Buddha talk about? Well, he talks about letting go of the ego. He talks about, especially in the Mahayana, working for the benefit of others, right? So I kind of use those two things to say, okay, this is how I'm going to approach the situation. And so the situation arises. There's nothing I can do about it. It's already arisen. The causes and conditions have come together for this situation to unfold. The only thing I can control is my response to that situation. So I had to go get a lawyer. It was the first time I ever dealt with a lawyer. It was a very interesting experience. And I remember talking to the lawyer, and I said, you know, whatever the process is, I want it to go as smooth as possible. I want it to be whatever is in the best interest of the child, while trying to maintain a little, you know, don't allow them to just rake me across the coals, in a sense. Just for my own mind's sake, let's just do what's in the best interest of the child. And so the lawyer said, okay. So I had to do a DNA test, you know, to prove paternity, which was fine. I had to go in front of the court once to say who I was. In fact, they gave me my daughter's name at the time, and her name is one that you can't tell if it's a boy or girl's name. So I didn't even know if it was a boy or a girl. But we went through the process, and it was really interesting. I went to court once, never heard back from the lawyer until they came back and said, well, congratulations, you have a daughter. You know, you're paying child support, which I'm like, okay, that's fine. You know, if I have a child in my life, that's my responsibility. It's in the best interest of the child. And the cool thing was I got partial custody of this kid who I'd never met before. And I thought, oh my gosh, this poor kid. But it's interesting because my wife and I had always wanted children, and my wife never wanted children. And all of a sudden, I have a child in my life that she didn't have to go through the 9-month process to produce. So she's happy. I mean, she wasn't completely happy with the whole situation. But she was happy that my family no longer hounded her about having children. So that brought a little peace to her mind. But 9 months later, it was really interesting. It was 9 months later, I had this daughter. How many people have ever had to deal with a lawyer before? You know, you have like the retainer you have to pay, you know, put up, and then you get the bill. Well, we had moved because I wanted to be kind of in a better area, school district, let my daughter have her own room. You know, it was very new. I was really excited about it. But I never got a bill from the lawyer. And I thought, this is interesting. So I actually called the lawyer and I said, I want you to know we moved. I thought I gave you my address. I haven't received a bill. And the lawyer said, well, that's because your retainer covered everything. That your case was the easiest paternity case I've ever worked on because the mother was the exact same way, whatever's in the best interest of the kid. So the lawyer was like, it was drafting documents, having you go into the court, prove who you were, and that was it. Easy peasy. And I thought, wow, maybe there is something about this Buddhist stuff. And so from that moment, I had an opportunity to really put all of this into practice as an experiment. Anytime I'm conflicted, anytime my mind is troubled, I always think about the teachings. What do the teachings say? And then let me try to apply that to see if I get an outcome that's different than me banging my head against the wall for the 1000th time. And I will say, without a doubt, every time I've done that, it's been a great outcome. It may not be the outcome I had wanted, but in my daughter's case, it's a fantastic outcome. I got to have a relationship with this beautiful woman. I have a grandchild now. My wife actually had a great relationship with her, and so it's this opportunity. If I would have, I look back on it and I think if I would have gone down the road that everybody else had and fought it, think about all the pain that would have been in my own mind, all the pain that would have been in the child's mind. Who knows what would have come out of it. But I know from experience that the outcome that I had was positive. There was peace in my mind. There was joy and happiness from the experience. May not happen for you, but what I would like to tell you all is when you're trying to apply the teachings into your daily life, think of it like an experiment. Find teachings that might help you. Maybe it's a verse, maybe it's a quote, maybe it's a sutra. But try to find something that touches your heart, that makes you want to try an alternate reaction. Because the Buddhist teachings aren't meant to be locked away in monasteries or left behind on the meditation cushion. It's meant to be lived. And the heart of the Buddhist practice is not found in escaping our daily life, but embracing it with the wisdom and compassion. Mindfulness transforms our routine in sacred presence. Patience turns anger into compassion. Having right speech uplifts our conversation. Generosity brightens ordinary encounters. And equanimity helps us meet life's unpredictability with grace. When we live this way, the boundary between the meditation cushion and the daily commute dissolves, and the Dharma ceases to be something separate from our lives and instead becomes the very way we live. So I hope this talk has been beneficial to you. May your week be filled with compassion, wisdom, gratefulness, and joy.
Thank you for listening to the Rime Buddhist Center's Dharma Talk podcast. Music was provided by Barefoot Bran Music. Please consider supporting the Rime Buddhist Center by making a donation at our website at www.rimecenter.org/donate.